Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into some seriously interesting stuff?
Always.
Today we're going deep on something that's kind of creepy when you think about it. Filter bubbles.
Yeah. Those sneaky online echo chambers we all get stuck in.
We're going to break down how they work, why they're actually a big deal, and some ways we might be able to pop them.
All right.
Our main source for this deep dive is a piece from the German text, Eingefügter text. You know what that means?
Inserted text.
Right. Catchy, huh?
Definitely gets the point across.
It digs into how these bubbles form without us even noticing.
Which is like the scariest part.
Totally. And it looks at some cool solutions, even using AI to see things more broadly.
Sounds fascinating.
Okay, so imagine you're scrolling through your feed, and it's just the same opinion over and over. Ever feel that?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Well, guess what? It's not just you. There are these crazy algorithms working behind the scenes to make that happen.
Seriously, they're like little puppet masters.
So wait, you mean it's not just that I'm drawn to certain posts? There's a system making sure I only see those.
Yep. And it feeds you more and more of what it thinks you want. Sounds helpful, but...
But it's kind of messed up if you think about it. If you only ever see stuff you already agree with, how do you ever learn anything new?
Exactly. You never get to challenge your own views or understand other perspectives.
It's like you're stuck in a room with a bunch of people who all think the same thing.
A very boring room, I'd imagine. And Eingefügter text actually calls this tendency confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
Basically, we favor info that backs up what we already believe, even if it's wrong.
Oh, right. Like if I think aliens exist, I'm more likely to believe a blurry photo is a UFO.
Exactly. And guess what? These algorithms are making that bias even worse.
Okay, I get the bias thing, but how do these algorithms actually work? They're not reading my mind, are they?
Not quite mind reading, but they're getting pretty good. It's all about something called predictive analytics.
Predictive. So they're trying to predict what I'll like.
Exactly. They look at everything you do online. What you click, what you like, share, even how long you read an article.
They're watching me that closely.
They're watching all of us.
Yeah.
And with that data, they build this super detailed profile about you and your interests.
So like if I read a lot about electric cars, they'll show me more of that. Even ads for Teslas, probably.
Bingo! The more you interact with something, the more they think you're into it. So they show you even more of it.
So there's like a feedback loop. The more I click, the more I see, and it just keeps going.
Precisely. And most platforms use a mix of collaborative and content-based filtering.
Hold on. What's that mean?
Collaborative filtering is like, hey, people like you are into this, so you might be too. And content-based filtering breaks down the actual content, to match it to what you've liked before.
So basically, it's a recipe for getting stuck in a rut, seeing the same stuff over and over again.
Exactly. And it might not even be accurate information, just stuff that fits your bubble.
So we're kind of creating our own custom news feeds filled with our own biases.
Pretty much. But here's the thing. Eingefügter text warns us that these algorithms, they're not perfect.
Uh-oh. So what goes wrong?
Well, they can have these unintended side effects. Big problems, actually. And the text specifically mentions 3.
Lay it on me.
Confirmation bias, which we talked about, but also polarization and echo chambers.
We already talked about confirmation bias. So polarization.
Yeah.
That's when people with different views just get further apart, right?
You got it. And these filter bubbles can actually make that worse.
So
Think about it. If you only see stuff you agree with, you're way less likely to even understand the other side, let alone be open to their viewpoint.
oh yeah, I see that all the time on social media. It's like everyone's talking past each other. No one's really listening.
Exactly. And that can have some serious consequences for society. Finding common ground becomes impossible. People get more hostile.
It's kind of depressing, honestly. Like we're all just digging ourselves deeper into our own little trenches.
And then there's the echo chamber problem.
Echo chamber. Yeah. So like when you're only hearing your own opinions repeated back to you.
Exactly. It's like polarization on steroids, online spaces where everyone agrees no matter how crazy the belief is. And any dissenting voice gets drowned out immediately.
It's like everyone's just patting each other on the back saying, yeah, we're right, everyone else is wrong. And the algorithm is just fueling that fire.
Exactly. The worst part is we often don't even realize we're in an echo chamber.
We think we're getting a balanced view, but it's just this tiny sliver of reality curated by these algorithms.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. So, okay, if they're so good at predicting what we want, do we even have any control? I mean, I can tweak some settings, but
That's a great question, and Eingefügter text dives into that too. Honestly, our ability to really change what we see is limited.
Limited.
These algorithms are so complex, even if companies were more transparent, who has the time to figure them out?
So we're stuck, trapped in these bubbles, fed biased info, and more divided. That's not great.
Not at all. And the source material makes it clear the consequences of this are huge E. It's not just missing out on cool content.
So what's the real-world damage? Sounds like it goes way beyond just annoying political posts from your uncle.
Way beyond. One big thing they talk about is restricted opinion diversity.
Restricted. So, like, we're not getting the full picture.
Exactly. If you're only exposed to a few viewpoints, it's tough to form a real opinion on anything complex.
That affects everything, right? Relationships, politics, even personal choices.
Exactly.
Like trying to solve a puzzle with only half the pieces.
Exactly. And this leads to the next problem, amplified polarization. We talked about it, but it gets worse the more isolated we become.
Oh, yeah. Like we're literally speaking different languages because we've been in these separate bubbles for so long.
Perfectly put. And the source actually mentions another danger vulnerability to manipulation and disinformation.
Wait, so it's not just about missing out. We're actually being misled.
Big time. The more biased our feed, the easier it is to fall for something that just isn't true.
Man, that's messed up. It's like we're being exploited. So is there any way out of this mess? Any way to break free?
Thankfully, yes. The authors offer some solutions, some pretty creative ones, actually, but they're clear. There's no easy fix.
So deleting all social media and living off the grid isn't the answer.
Probably not. It's about being smarter with tech, using it to fight back against these bubbles.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What kind of tech solutions are we talking about?
One of the most basic is transparency and user control. Right now, these algorithms are like a black box.
We don't know how they work, and we can't really control them.
Right, so platforms need to be upfront about their algorithms, maybe even give us more ways to customize our feeds.
Like actually choosing what we see instead of the algorithm deciding for us.
Exactly. But the text is clear, that's not enough. We also need media literacy.
Media literacy, what's that?
Basically, giving people the skills to critically evaluate information, especially online.
So like knowing how to spot bias, fake news, and clickbait.
You got it. We need to be teaching this stuff from a young age. It's that important.
Makes sense. The text also mentions regulation and ethical guidelines, but isn't that kind of controversial? Wouldn't that mess with free speech?
It's definitely tricky, and the text acknowledges that. But we need to at least discuss how to make sure these powerful algorithms are used responsibly.
So not telling people what to think, but making sure the system isn't rigged against them.
Right. Finding a balance between freedom and protection.
Okay, that's transparency, user control, media literacy, and maybe some regulation. But the source also hints at something way more innovative, using AI to break down the bubbles themselves.
Now you're talking. They've got some seriously radical ideas like search terms as categories.
Search terms as categories. What's that all about?
Imagine saving whole categories of info, not just individual search terms.
So instead of searching climate change solutions, I could save a category like climate change perspectives, which would show me
Everything. From the skeptics to the activists, a whole range of viewpoints.
like a built-in filter bubble buster. And that's where AI comes in.
Exactly. AI could help organize all that info in a way that's comprehensive and personalized.
So AI is helping us see beyond our own narrow search terms and showing us things that we might not have even thought to look for.
Exactly. Expanding our horizons, not just reinforcing what we already believe.
Wow, this is getting really cool. But how exactly could AI do that? I mean, it can't read our minds yet.
Not yet. But AI is getting good at understanding language and behavior. And the text talks about semantic analysis.
Semantic analysis. In English, please.
Basically, AI can now understand the meaning behind our words, not just the words themselves.
So it could figure out what I'm really interested in, even if my search terms are kind of vague.
Exactly. If you search for climate change solutions, AI knows you're probably interested in renewable energy, carbon capture, sustainability, all that.
And then it can show me a bunch of stuff related to those topics, even if I didn't specifically search for them.
You got it. It's about AI understanding the nuances of what we mean, not just matching keywords.
That's amazing. But there's more, right? Something about topic identification.
Right. This is where AI takes things to the next level. It can analyze everything you do online, your browsing history, social media, even your emails.
To figure out what I'm interested in, even stuff I haven't explicitly searched for.
Precisely. It's like having an AI research assistant who's constantly learning about you and suggesting new things to explore.
So it's personalizing my information in a way that actually helps me, not just traps me in a bubble.
Exactly. AI can be a force for good.
This is all starting to sound pretty hopeful.
No?
But the text also says we can't just rely on AI to save us.
Right. Technology can be a powerful tool, but we have to use it wisely.
We need to be responsible for our own information diets, not just let the algorithms decide what we think. So where do we even begin? I'm kind of overwhelmed by all of this.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But remember, even small changes can make a big difference. The key is to be intentional about what we consume and who we trust.
So instead of just scrolling mindlessly through my feeds, I should actively seek out different perspectives and challenge my own assumptions.
Exactly. The text recommends a few practical steps you can start taking right now, like diversifying your online networks.
So follow people on social media who have different views than me, even if it makes me uncomfortable.
It might, but that's how we grow and learn.
Okay, I can try that. What else?
Vary your news sources. Don't just stick to the same old websites or TV channels.
So get out of my comfort zone and see what other people are saying.
Exactly. And be aware of your own biases.
Biases.
We all have them. And they can really affect how we see the world, especially when it comes to controversial topics.
So if I know I lean a certain way, I should actively seek out the opposite view.
Exactly. Challenge yourself. It's not always easy, but it makes you a better thinker.
Informed citizen, right.
You got it. And this brings us to another important point. Talk to people who disagree with you.
Yeah, really.
I know it can be tough, but respectful dialogue is so important.
So no more online arguments. No more dismissing people just because they disagree with me.
Try to understand where they're coming from. Ask questions. Find common ground.
That's actually really good advice. It's not about changing their mind, but about understanding each other better.
Exactly. And this goes beyond just filter bubbles. It's how we should be interacting with everyone, both online and offline.
We could all use a little more of that, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about thinking critically, especially online.
Online.
It's so easy to spread misinformation online. We have to be super careful about what we believe.
So question everything. Don't just take things at face value.
Right. Consider the source. Look for evidence, and be wary of anything that feels overly emotional or manipulative.
So don't just blindly believe everything I see on social media.
Exactly. Do your own research. Form your own conclusions. Take control of your information diet.
Wow, this has been eye-opening. Filter bubbles, the dangers, and the solutions. It's a lot, but it feels good knowing we can actually do something about it.
It's empowering, right?
Totally. So as we wrap up part 1, we want to leave you with something to think about.
A little homework.
Exactly. What's one small change you can make today to start diversifying your information diet and break free from your filter bubble?
It could be as simple as following a new account, subscribing to a different newsletter, or fact-checking a story before you share it.
Every little bit helps. We'll be back with part 2 soon, where we'll dive even deeper into those solutions. See you then.
Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive. We're ready to talk solutions.
You bet. I'm feeling a little less overwhelmed now that we've broken down the problem, but I'm ready for some actionable advice. How do we actually escape these filter bubbles?
Great. Well, remember how we talked about Uncontrollable text suggesting multiple approaches? Let's start with one they call search terms as categories.
Right, that sounds super interesting, like using categories instead of just specific search terms.
Exactly. Imagine this. You're researching climate change, right? Instead of searching for climate change solutions.
Which probably just gives you a bunch of articles from people who already agree on the solution.
Yep. You could save a whole category like climate change perspectives.
Oh, I like that. So you'd get articles from like scientists, activists, policymakers, maybe even some skeptics.
Exactly. You're getting the full picture, all the different angles.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how would that actually work?
Well, that's where the AI magic comes in. It can analyze tons of information, figure out what fits into each category.
And then personalize it for me based on my interests and maybe even my biases.
Bingo. So you're getting a broad perspective, but it's still relevant to you.
Okay, so AI is helping us break out of our narrow search terms. But the text also mentions something called topic identification.
Right. This one is even wilder. Imagine AI that's constantly analyzing your online activity. Your browsing history, social media, even your emails.
Okay, that sounds a little creepy, like Big Brother is watching.
Haha, yeah, I get it. But hear me out. What if it used that information to identify topics you might be interested in, even if you haven't searched for them directly?
So, like, it's picking up on subtle clues, patterns in my behavior, to figure out what I'm curious about.
Exactly. It's like having a personal AI librarian who's constantly curating a reading list just for you, full of diverse perspectives.
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing. It's like AI is helping us discover things we didn't even know we were interested in.
Exactly. It's about expanding our horizons, not just reinforcing our existing biases.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could really work. But I guess the big question is, will platforms actually implement these changes?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's going to take a lot of pressure from users, from policymakers, from society as a whole.
So we can't just sit back and wait for tech companies to fix this for us. We have to be active participants in the solution.
Absolutely. We need to demand more transparency, more control, more ethical algorithms, and we need to be willing to put in the work ourselves to diversify our own information diets.
Okay, so it's a two-way street. We need better tech, but we also need to be more mindful users.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology either. Eingefügter Text emphasizes the importance of media literacy.
Right. Teaching people how to think critically about information, especially online.
Exactly. We need to equip everyone with the tools to spot bias, to recognize misinformation, to evaluate sources.
So it's like giving people a BS detector for the internet.
Kind of. But seriously, this is essential, especially for young people growing up in a digital world.
I totally agree. We need to be teaching this stuff in schools, alongside reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental skill for the 21st century.
So we've got tech solutions, media literacy. What else can we do? What about regulations?
That's a tricky one. It's a fine line between protecting users and stifling innovation.
Right, free speech and all that.
Exactly. But Eingefügter Text argues that we need to at least have the conversation, maybe some basic ethical guidelines for algorithms.
So not dictating what people can see, but making sure the system is designed with fairness and transparency in mind.
Precisely. And that's going to require collaboration between policymakers, tech companies, and everyday users.
Okay, so it's a big challenge, but it's not hopeless. We can actually make a difference.
We absolutely can. But it's not just about relying on big solutions. It also comes down to individual choices.
Like what I choose to read, who I follow, how I engage with information online.
Exactly. Remember those practical steps we talked about earlier?
Right. Diversifying our networks, varying our news sources, being aware of our biases, engaging in respectful dialogue.
And most importantly, being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Okay, so it's a combination of individual effort and systemic change. We need better tech, but we also need to be better users. We need to be more mindful, more critical, more open-minded.
Beautifully put. It's about taking responsibility for our own information diets and being active participants in the fight against filter bubbles.
This has been a really inspiring conversation. I'm feeling a lot more hopeful now.
Me too. It's a challenge, but it's one we can overcome.
So what's next? What are we diving into in part 3?
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into filter bubbles.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems, the big picture solutions. But what can we actually do about this in our daily lives? I'm ready for some practical tips.
All right, let's get tactical. Remember, even small changes can make a big difference. It's all about building better habits.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the first step to breaking free from these bubbles?
Eingefügter Text actually has some great advice for this. One thing they suggest is diversifying your online networks.
Diversifying. So like following people on social media who have different viewpoints than me.
Exactly. Think about it. Who are you following right now? Are they all pretty much like you?
Yeah, I guess most of them are.
So challenge yourself. Find people who have different political opinions, different backgrounds, different life experiences.
Okay, so branch out a little, step outside my comfort zone. That actually sounds kind of fun.
It can be. It's all about exposing yourself to new ideas and perspectives.
And maybe learning something along the way. What else can we do?
Another simple but powerful tip, vary your news sources.
Oh, right. I tend to get my news from the same few places.
And that's totally normal, but try mixing it up. Read articles from different websites, different newspapers, different countries even.
So don't just stick to what's familiar and comfortable.
Exactly. Seek out news sources that challenge your assumptions.
I could definitely try that. What about being more aware of my own biases? We talked about that earlier.
That's huge. It's so important to recognize that we all have biases.
Even if we don't realize it, right?
Right. And those biases affect how we interpret information, especially on topics we care about.
So, like, if I know I have a strong opinion on something, I should actively try to find information that challenges that opinion.
Exactly. See what the other side is saying. Read articles you might normally disagree with. It's all about stretching your brain and being open to new possibilities.
Okay, so diversify my networks, vary my news sources, be aware of my biases. Is there anything else I can do to be a more informed citizen?
Absolutely. And this is a big one. Engage in respectful dialogue with people who disagree with you.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Especially these days, it feels like everyone's just arguing all the time.
I know it's hard, but it's so important. It's how we learn from each other, how we bridge divides.
So instead of just arguing with people online, I should try to actually understand their point of view, even if I think they're wrong.
Exactly. Listen more than you speak. Ask clarifying questions. Try to find common ground, even if you don't agree on everything.
That's good advice, not just for online interactions, but for life in general, right?
You got it. It's about building empathy and understanding.
We could all use more of that. Okay, so we've talked about diversifying, varying sources, being aware of biases, and having those tough conversations. What about actual critical thinking skills? How do we get better at evaluating information, especially online?
That's key. We need to be savvy consumers of information. Savvy. So, don't just believe everything I read.
Right. Question everything. Look for evidence. Consider the source. Be wary of emotional manipulation. Is this information coming from a reliable source? Does it align with what you already know? Are there any red flags?
It's like being a detective, isn't it?
Exactly. You have to be on the lookout for clues and use your critical thinking skills to separate fact from fiction.
Okay, that makes sense. So what have we learned from this deep dive? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. We've explored the mechanics of filter bubbles, the dangers they pose to individuals and society, and most importantly, the ways we can break free.
And it's not just about tech solutions, right? It's about personal responsibility, about being mindful, about actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in creating a more informed and connected world.
So before we sign off, one last question for our listeners. What's one small change you can make today to break free from your filter bubble? It could be as simple as unfollowing someone who always makes you angry, subscribing to a newsletter from a different political perspective, or taking 5 minutes to fact-check a story before you share it.
It all adds up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into filter bubbles. We hope you learned something new and feel empowered to take action. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those filter bubbles at bay.